Marg and Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you again.
Very good to see you. And Justin, this is the first time we've actually done a podcast together. Um, the first thing I wanted to say was just sort of tuning into the here and now, I suppose. How does it feel being here after 5 years of having this now come to pass?
It's this mix of like, oh my God, it's finally done, relief, a bit of grief, but it feels like it was 40 years. I don't know, like
Yeah.
it's just so much has happened. I was saying to a friend the other day, I feel like I've kind of come out of some cave,
Yeah.
blinking into the sunlight, and I've felt like I've been in an altered state for the last 4 or 5 years, if I'm
Yes.
honest. That's what it feels like. So, being immersed in patient experiences and, being in the room itself,
Hmm.
you do feel like you're in a bit of an altered state
Yeah.
with them, beautiful lighting, nice music, and it's very, so quite tangible. So it's been a phenomenal 5 years, and yeah, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thanks
It's
for having me. Great to talk about it again.
I
So
know, I know. Well, just for a bit of context before we dive in, and I'd actually probably just like to formally introduce you guys again for the pod. I know you've been on the show a couple of times, Mark, but Justin is the first time we've had you. So it'd be nice to set the frame, I suppose, for the listeners. But just for a bit of context, like I said, before the show, um, 5 years ago, I remember calling you, Marg, and saying what this was all like, and doing some of the initial media prior to
mm,
the results and the experiences and all this sort of stuff. So I mean, such a long journey, and then what you get out of that, beyond the phenomenology of the experience is just a paper.
yeah, I know. You're like, oh God, it's just, and like, look, it's we're thrilled with it. We're very happy with the results that we got. But I mean, gosh, how can you compress so many universes and so many beautiful and profound experiences, and and also very challenging experiences as well, um, and kind of put that into a paper. It's we lose so much, but
Yeah,
yeah, but
totally.
yeah,
No,
so
it's nice. It's so nice.
yeah,
So let's set the frame. So,
yep.
Mark, could you introduce yourself first, and then we'll go to you, Justin, then we'll talk about what the hell we're actually talking about here today.
Yay!
Yep.
I'm a clinical psychologist, work at St. Vincent's, and I was the chief principal investigator for a study using psilocybin-assisted therapy to investigate whether we could reduce anxiety and depression in people who were facing advanced life-threatening illness. So many of them were, most of them were diagnosed with a terminal illness, and quite advanced stages. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's who I am and my comrade here.
So I'm Justin. So I'm a psychiatrist at St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, and I'm the head of unit for the, I guess, the sort of cancer and palliative care psychiatry team. And
Mm,
Marg and I were the main, I suppose, like uh, therapist dyad in the study. Um, and yeah, worked together
Mm,
very sort of closely. We treated most of the patients ourselves,
yeah.
and
mm.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. The benefit
still,
of just like going, "Oh, is anyone available? Oh,
yeah,
yeah, we are. We'll have to
yeah,
do it."
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So in the end, yeah, it was phenomenal actually. And you were one of the co-principal investigators. So
yes.
Justin has also helped with a lot of the analysis of the
Mm.
qualitative component, which has all been,
yes,
and yeah.
yes.
So yeah, here we are at the end of it all.
Before we dive into the research, what draws you both to, and perhaps more specifically you there, Justin, what draws you to palliative care? There's a depth to working with people like that.
Oh, look, so my interest was always in working with people who've got like complex health problems and people who had problems that crossed lots of boundaries in healthcare systems.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
treated under different teams, sometimes across different hospitals, and all of the like usual kind of, suppose, psychological turmoil that emerges in that kind of setting, not just for the person who's the patient, but the teams as well,
Mm,
who often are faced with feelings of hopelessness and powerlessness, who often, because they've seen the person over many years, will have, whether they like it or not, joined with the family and
mm,
Mm,
become part of the system that the person lives in.
yeah.
And so I kind of fell into it through working in a HIV service in London
Mm.
for a few years before I sort of came back here to start my psychiatry training. And then as soon as I could, I moved back into sort of medical illness. So I worked in a, big women's and babies hospital, big cancer hospital, work with people who've got brain disorders,
Mm.
but then sort of just naturally sort of found my spot, which was people dealing with cancer, advanced illness, and dying. And yeah, I mean, it's not just the clinical work, it's also, I have a real interest in the experience of dying and knowing you're going to die. I have a really interest in things like suicide in
Mm.
people who are medically unwell, as well as, I guess what the sort of the content of this trial was, which is looking at sort of how do you live knowing that you're going to die,
Mm.
and how is your life changed?
Mm.
How are your relationships changed? How is your sense of meaning derived at this point?
Mm.
What does it actually mean to know that this is happening to you? So
Mm.
that's sort of really the background in terms of my interest.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful statement. How do you live knowing that you're going to die? I
Yeah.
think it's so important. I've had the terror management theorists on the podcast before, that their whole research canon, I suppose, is based on The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker.
Mm.
Really interesting book. And I think what discerns, and you guys can obviously speak to this further, but what discerns the rest of us from people who are in palliative care is the imminence of their death. We tend to sort of just shove it over there a little bit, and then react to it by, building our immortality projects, or, there's a lot of research that even shows how we're much more likely to turn toward authoritarian leaders in times of existential distress and things of that notion. But when death is so imminent, do you notice that there's a different feeling tone or different energy, I suppose, when speaking to people who are facing these sorts of illnesses?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. And there are like um, moments I remember very, very vividly actually talking with someone who, I guess different patients over the years who are in that exact moment
mm,
Mm.
of having the world fall away from underneath them, and
yeah.
it's communicated
Mm.
non-verbally
It's
in the
visceral.
Mm.
moment.
It is absolutely
Yeah,
visceral.
it's quite
Yeah.
gut-wrenching actually.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And they
Mm.
know it. Like,
Mm,
there is no getting out of this. There is no backing out. It's,
mm,
you hit the limits of what medicine can do.
mm.
And as therapists in that space, you hit the limits of what therapy can do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's where you're stripped raw as a therapist. It's just two humans in this ultra vulnerable space. And that's where, at least for me, I found my edges as a therapist. Yeah. And then this work was a whole other level again.
Yeah.
So because they were in that space, and then we, gave them the psychedelic experience along with the psychotherapy, and it was just, yeah,
Yeah, even more. Well, perfect segue, Marg. I appreciate that. That's fantastic.
yeah,
So tell us about the research then. Tell us about the aim, what sort of moved you both into working together, and then we can perhaps dive right in.
yeah. So just for context as well, we've actually worked together for about, oh God, 13
Yeah.
years.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we've
okay.
been in this. So this is how it all happened in this humble little team. We're
Yeah.
this tiny wee team that, shared desks in
Yeah.
at
Just
St. Vincent's.
yeah,
We were hot desking and
yeah.
basically so we would see people on the palliative care ward and also on the oncology ward at St. Vincent's. And I'd do a little bit of staff support and you'd do clinical. Anyway, so we've been working together all this time, and we'd seen people not respond to
Mm.
medication or not respond to talking therapy because they're just so locked into that, as you were describing before, that moment of that terror of
Yep.
just knowing you're going to die. Now,
Yep.
when you can't access that a lot of the time with just talking therapy,
Yep.
sometimes you can. It depends on the person, but when you can't, they're just locked in that kind of state of terror. They're very withdrawn. They
Mm.
they can't communicate. They can't embody the moment their life is all about dying. It's all about, when is it going to happen? When
Mm.
is it going to happen? I can't enjoy this moment because it might be my last. So their whole existence is just about when, how, and it's not living, it's just
Yeah.
surviving, I think. So that was our work that we were doing. And just to refresh the story that we've spoken about before, I was sort of looking at these other ways and emerging therapies, and had seen what was going on in the US and was very inspired by that. So I was like, okay, let's see if we can do that here. And so going to Justin, who, as head of the department at that point, although when we started you weren't, so we've known each other a long time and worked side by side. And then so I went to him and I said, look, I've got this idea. How about giving psilocybin to people who've got end of life distress?
Yes.
And he was like, yeah, talk to me. All right, let's so we're open. And he goes, look, I'm open-minded. I need to. He wanted to see the science. Showed him the science. Looked pretty good. And he said, yeah, all right, we can do this. I don't think either of us knew. Let's be honest.
No.
How big an undertaking.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, clinical trials are enormous and they're a lot of work. And so then obviously when it got up and was approved, and it went just berserk in a way that we were not expecting at all. And we'd had global attention on us.
Mm.
And we were still in that same little bloody desk.
Yes. Interesting.
Office that, we couldn't, sort of fighting to find desks. And people thought it was some kind of like research mecca. And like, oh, can I come and do an internship? Which is like, we can't even, I haven't got enough seats for, it was this strange kind of place that we were thrust into after all this kind of took off, or at least got known about. And so really we just had this tiny little team and that we had cobbled together, and we had very little money. We had a little bit of funding, philanthropic donation from prison, which was very grateful we accepted. But the scale of these things, you're talking about a $2.5 million clinical trial.
Wow.
And much of that was covered by St. Vincent's in kind in our roles, but also then we would just work on our days off. So, and all the document development, all that kind of thing, I just did myself and on weekends. And so I did, all of that kind of infrastructure was sort of supported from the hospital. But and then we sort of embarked on it. It was just this, as I said, it was just this tiny little, it was just us really. So that's how we started working. I'm like, do you want to be my dyad partner? He's like, yeah, sure. And that was interesting.
Yeah.
That was interesting because working with another therapist in the room.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That was weird. And it was not easy.
Not at all.
To begin with.
Oh, tell me about that. That's so cool.
It was, go on then. You can be as honest as you like.
Oh, look, I think we both come from very different therapeutic traditions.
Yeah.
And have had very different training.
Yeah.
Very.
But I think so there's that, but there's also too, I think, when you work as a therapist, you're used to working on your own.
Yeah.
And having someone else there, it is, it's a very strange experience.
At the beginning, it was just bizarre.
Yeah.
And I was like, is he going to talk? Am I going to talk? Yeah. And then so Justin's psychoanalytically trained.
Yeah.
So would sit with a lot of silence, a lot of, I'm much more kind of active. I was trained in sensory motor psychotherapy and kind of mindfulness-based therapy. And so I was doing, somatic work. And I'm like, oh, so where are you experiencing that? And I'd, asking these questions, and Justin would be like, what is she doing? And then he'd say things
so much.
he would, I'm just like, are you not going to grab that? So it was a lot of learning to dance.
Yeah.
In this way.
Yeah.
Had a few rows. It was very
of course
productive, but but I have to say it's been one of the most profound learnings to learn to work as a dyad. And I remember the day when we stopped working as two therapists and became a dyad. And I remember we went into supervision and we had this wonderful supervisor, Tim Reed from Imperial College in London, who had supervised the studies with Robin Card-Harris
Oh, yeah.
and Ros Watts and and I remember going into supervision this, and I was absolutely convinced that I was in the right and
Yep.
that Justin was
Yes.
in the wrong. And I had to follow my thought. It was great. And I said, I'm having this experience of the patient. So I was talking about my countertransference, and Justin was talking about his countertransference, and I said, but I think I thought we had to be on the same page. And Tim, I will never forget, and he said, it sounds like you're both experiencing the patient exactly the way that you both need to be.
Mm.
So there's this, you have an experience of him in this way and I that. And so I was like, oh yeah. And all of a sudden it was like, it's not just one kind of accurate picture here. It is this very it's a 3D I guess picture and all these nuances that I had not seen,
Hmm.
didn't appreciate, that came through having another therapist in the room. And so there were not only two counter transfer, two transferences
Yes.
sitting in the room.
Yes.
I'm watching the participant and this transference and counter like moving in the session, and I was like,
Yep.
this is fascinating.
Yep. Like
And
a co-transference occurring.
yes,
You guys are
yes,
stumbling through creating your own dynamic as a triad as well as a dyad.
100%.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fascinating. And then it sort of became instead of kind of going, oh, why is he leaving that, I'll be like, oh my God, that's really good, that how he's done that. And so then all of a sudden we made space for each other, and then
Yeah.
we started working together, and it was just, yeah, it's like learning to dance, I think.
Yeah, totally. I love that. One of my favorite books is Borderline Personality Disorder and the Conversational Model by Russell Mears from Sydney.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I love because he talks about how, specifically with people with, really difficult personality structures from attachment wounds and, really difficult upbringings, there's this in emergent sense of self, and they define self. And this is actually an interesting segue because I noticed that one of the constructs that are in the research that you guys did was transcend experiences, mystical experiences, right? And the ineffability of those mystical, the loosening of the self construct. Um, he talks about in the book how the self is uh, understood as a construct, I suppose, to operationalize based upon William James's idea of the dynamic relationship between the subject and the object. And
yeah,
people who have really, really, destructive attachment histories don't have that relationship between how I am in the world and the part of me that notices me in the world.
yes,
And
yeah,
and as that comes more online through this model called the conversational model, it's all about picking up on the nonverbals, the implicit, the right hemispheric activation of the conversation. And isn't it so beautiful how even if I've never experienced the dyadic situation, but
oh,
especially in therapy, you feel yourself at times being the self in within you in that moment is being created along with the client at the same time.
yeah,
So we're
yeah,
creating our own environment here, and it can be very um, vulnerable, because we tend to sort of want to be the master regulator.
yeah,
But
yeah,
to
yeah. You're
help
being
you,
cast in a role. You're being cast in a role, and um, and that was even more augmented
Mm,
in the dose experiences. Like, of yeah, it's basically it's transference on steroids.
yeah,
Um, and we were cast in many roles
yes,
during the session. Loving father, loving mother. Malevolent
mhm,
figures. I think we were guardian angels at one stage for
totally.
somebody who thought he'd actually died and was waiting to go to the next realm, and opened his eyes and took the eye shades off and looked at us and actually thought at that point that we were there to take him to another realm. So yeah, there were all sorts of things that were played out in that room, and it was extraordinary. It was
Mm.
so powerful. Um,
Let's. I know. I have to watch my own counter transference because I feel like I could just ask you a million different questions and go on a million different tangents. So I want to stay true to why we're here. Um, the what you guys were looking for in the research specifically was whether there'd be a reduction in anxiety, depression, and existential distress.
Yeah, so look, I think you can only have a certain number of primary outcomes when you do, statistics in a study design like this. So we looked at it was transdiagnostic. We looked at levels of depression and anxiety. We tried to have a similar um, measure outcome measures and design that was conducted back in 2016 in NYU with Stephen Ross and colleagues, no relation by the way. And they looked at so we tried to really kind of map and replicate their findings,
Yep.
with the exception of expanding the research to non-malignant terminal illness, because we're clinicians, and so we're not researchers in that way. We flirt with academia, and flirt badly, but but when we would go on the ward, we don't just see cancer patients. And the problem is when these treatments are approved, they're only approved for the population that it was tested on.
I see.
And with. So, it meant then that if we walked into our palliative care roles, on the ward there, a certain percentage of people just would not be eligible for something like this, which was, it made no sense for us. We wanted to make it as real world as possible. So I very much designed this with the intent to bring this to as many people as we could in the palliative care model.
Interesting.
Obviously within safety parameters.
Yes.
So yeah, that was what we were looking for. So we're looking at the safety of bringing it to people who had not been tested with psilocybin previously.
Fantastic.
And if we could obviously see similar reductions in depression and anxiety. And then on top of that, we looked at things like spiritual well-being and mystical experiences, which had a like enormous effect size, like so much it looks like it's an error. It's so big.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, it was I think it's 29 or something ridiculous, which is just it doesn't compute. It's probably a spurious finding because we have such a small population.
Yep.
But because it was so different, from the placebo group having almost a flattened experience of mystical anything, to then having their experience of psilocybin, and then we re-administered that questionnaire, and it was just off the charts. So I think it went from like raw scores of like I can't remember, it's something like 17 to 111. Like it was off the charts.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So then the effect size was bang. But I mean, again, it's only 35 participants. We can't make big claims about it in that way. But yeah, it was sizable.
Yes. Any thoughts on that, Justin?
Sorry?
Any thoughts on that in particular for you?
Look, I guess for me, because I've been doing all the quality.
He's not a numbers person at all.
No.
He's like you, the philosophy.
Yeah. So look, I suppose for me, I sort of get stuck on thinking about like, well, what does that actually mean in terms of what this treatment did for people? Is it a necessary part of it? Is it just a sort of an interesting kind of phenomena that emerges in the context of other sorts of changes? I'm very sort of stuck on thinking about that at the moment and sort of trying to work out how to explain it all and what it actually means. Because there were equally people who remembered nothing from their experience, nothing at all.
Yeah.
And there were people who didn't, when they kind of emerged from it, some of them gave these like incredibly evocative descriptions of things like, moving through layers of the universe and these sort of learnings unfolding for them in the context of, this sort of wise spirit that sort of turned up to guide them. And, they had big changes, but there were also people who had none of that whatsoever that had big changes. And I think that's one of the sort of the challenges with this is figuring out like, so, I mean, a lot of these things sound, I think, like incredibly interesting and, and I think automatically you think, how could that not make a difference to somebody, particularly when they're dying?
Yeah.
But actually what it means, I don't know. How it relates to who it works for and who it doesn't, I don't actually know.
Yeah, we probably, out of our 35, we had about 4 or 5 that would have been considered non-responders who just didn't have a therapeutic effect at all.
Yep.
and I think just in terms of thinking about what it was like for them, I think they were very much hoping for, you know, the brain reset,
Yeah.
and I guess a more of a passive response to the treatment. Um, but the reality is it's extremely active,
Mm,
and people need to be active participants in the work. Like
mm,
I think unfortunately we've got a real problem with the messaging at the moment about what psychedelic therapy is.
yeah.
The new sexy, everyone wants it. But they sort of see it from the Michael Pollan, bless him. He's kind of we've got this thing called the Michael Pollan effect now, which is like, I want that trip. I want
Yes.
what he's having. I want,
Yes.
whereas, you'll have your own trip. You'll have what's in you and what's going on for you. And um, so, people sometimes would turn up obviously wanting the reset,
Mm.
Yeah.
the love and the light, and without understanding there's so many more layers to us and aspects to us. So um, there's I think a broader problem that we need to think about if we're moving in this space.
Do
But
you know
yeah.
the other part of that too, though, is it's not just the patients turning up who are wanting this sort of experience as it's described. It's other therapists as well
Well, that's true as
who
well.
who are
Yeah.
turning up, sort of feeling very much as though, this is exactly what they should be doing. This is the work their whole life that they've been wanting to do. And they have an expectation as well that it's going to be as it's described.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
in a way,
But
Yeah.
this is a
quite
brilliant
strange.
point. This is a really brilliant point, especially the point you made there about as it's described. I think the
Mm.
the evolution of this work has really largely been influenced by writers like Aldous Huxley, who's an
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible linguist.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
talking about an experience from someone who's so articulate
They
is
have the words.
they have the
Yes.
words. They have the words, right? And there are lots of people who have, really interesting experiences, but say, yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
You know?
Or they don't know their landscape and they don't want to know that landscape
Right.
and have cordoned it off
Mm.
Yep.
for most of their lives for good reason.
Yep.
And then they heard, oh, this is a really good treatment, only for it to just come blowing up in their face and in this very overwhelming manner.
Yes.
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 So and people who had said it doesn't matter what you said to me, and you gave us a lot of really good preparation, and I know you said this and I
Mm,
know you said that, almost to the point where, yeah, I get it now, thanks.
Yeah.
There is no way you could have ever prepared me
yeah.
for what I went through and what I saw. So yeah, there's
And I think that's a helpful point as well there, Mark. I always think about the ineffability of some of these experiences. That's such a
yeah.
helpful component to trying to understand a mystical experience. There's apparently Thomas Aquinas, obviously brilliant writer. Toward the end of his life, he had a mystical experience when he was in church one day, and he
Mm.
came home and sort of uses it as a heuristic. But he goes to all his mates and he says, "All my writing's bullshit. It's just sucks. Nothing that I can
Yeah,
write and demarcate, right,
yeah,
can speak to what the hell that was." So,
yeah,
so
100%.
writing and words is very limiting too.
Absolutely. And in fact, that was the thing, with so much of what, I mean, there were so many learnings, but one of the things for me at least, was how to de-emphasize our craft. Like
Mm,
we're in the business of doing talking therapy, but when people would come out, the more you talked about it, the more you would reduce it, and the further they would get away from it. So to try and collapse it into just a narrative and just words and
mm,
intellectualize it is to really take away from that experience. So the integration aspect of it was just um, learning
Mm.
to not work in those ways that we had been trained, but to expand that and
mm.
to work in the symbolic, to work in the creative arts.
Yeah.
We needed to learn different languages, I
Mm,
think.
mm,
Um, yeah, and to help them learn their own languages so that they could continue the work, so that it wasn't just, come back for, 1 hour a week or every couple of weeks, but that they could really weave it into their everyday. Yeah.
What was the psychotherapy like prior to the intervention?
I so it's because it's all come full circle. I'm thinking
Yeah.
like back to the very beginning.
Yes,
And
totally.
the very beginning was we wrote a therapy manual because, these things like to be standardized. How the hell do you standardize therapy? It's just like everyone,
Yeah.
anyone who's done sort of psychodynamic work goes, yeah, right. You can standardize that. It's so I remember I had to produce a therapy manual and I remember saying to Justin, look, this is sort of what we have to this is what we have to follow. This is a psychoanalyst.
Yeah. Yeah.
Follow this. This is what we have to do. And there were certain aspects of it that we just simply had to do as part of a standard, treatment framework. And we had a checklist that we had to for this is part of a clinical trial.
Of course.
There were things that we had to tick off for each session. And anyway, Justin shat on it from a great height.
Nice.
I can't describe it any other way except he was just like going, this is anyway.
Therapy.
He was just like, this is not therapy.
Yeah.
This is just this.
Yeah.
What the Anyway, so we anyway, it was a bit like he's just kind of saying it, just like, blew his nose with it. And then but we did, I mean, there were things obviously that the core components where we had to obviously get a developmental history and formulation that was about who are you, not only who are you, who are you going to be in that room and what are we going to expect and how are you likely to see us. So how have the important figures and important relationships come about in your life, and how are they playing out now and how are they going to play out with us?
Yeah, nice.
So the transference we knew was going to be augmented. We had no idea how much, and it really was.
Yes.
So that was the guts of what we did in the prep sessions, and then we looked at things like getting them prepared for the actual experience, sort of how to navigate it, what to expect, and again, how do you do that? But before we even went there, we asked a pivotal question, which is there anything that you don't want to come up in these sessions?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Because if they didn't, that's the stuff we had to focus on. And
totally.
because it was going to, it would come up, like the more you try and suppress something, three or four times, I think more likely to come back up. So that was a very, very important question that we had to ask. And then we would do some talking around that if there were things that people didn't want to come up, and how we would manage that and how we would meet that and use the a lot of reframing to, okay, well, now this is an opportunity to meet it very differently, in this whole other way and all these other ways that you've tried. But, if it does show up, let's think about how we would what will we do with that? How will you meet it? And what would you say to it? And so kind of getting them thinking that.
It's almost a Gestalt feel to that too, like actually speaking to these parts. There's an IFS component, but there's a Gestalt field as well.
Yeah. I think so we did that, but then what else did we do? We did the boundaries, is it?
Therapeutic touch.
Therapeutic touch.
Yes.
Very explicit talk about that.
A lot of rehearsal as well.
We'd actually rehearse it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if this aspect or this shadow component were to emerge, it was rehearsing around that?
No, sorry. Yeah, this is.
There's sort of more to do with, what might happen in the room on the dose day if they were to want to establish touch.
Oh yes.
Okay. Grab a hand or something like that. So and we had to acclimate people to the treatment.
Yes.
Like the environment as well, because it is intensely intimate and it's so different to sitting in front of a therapist. A chair, you've got a chair, you're lying down and you've got these two people sitting beside you, you're sort of flanked by them. I mean, how intimate is that? It's a lowered lighting, there's music, it's quite a soft atmosphere, but they're under a blanket. It's a very vulnerable place.
So vulnerable.
And then on top of that, they've got eye shades on and headphones. And we had only met them maybe a month prior to this. So that's a big trust. So we would take them, so obviously we'd do some talking, but then we would gradually move them into the dose space to kind of get them used to it. And then we would rehearse what it would feel like. So we would give them a music experience. And then during that, we would talk very, very explicitly about therapeutic touch and the
Yeah.
limits of that as well. It was never instigated by us. I know that they do that in the US where they'll go, "Oh, are you okay?" And we don't do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the things that we would say to people is, let's practice if you do, and also first of all, seeing if they do want therapeutic touch and if that's something that they're okay with. Some people don't want that and they need the safety of that distance, and so we'd find other ways to make contact with them if they needed some support.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Through talking and how they could let us know that they needed support.
So it's obvious for obvious reasons, extremely client-led,
Yes,
consent every step of the way.
only ever instigated by them.
Totally.
Always, yeah,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
So-
But before we dive in, there's this just the way you guys must have had to fast track the cultivation of the therapeutic alliance
Oh,
is
yeah.
almost sounds like it had to take on a creative component, given how vulnerable they're going to be.
Well, yeah.
The other part of it too, though, was, when we saw them in preparation for the dose, we didn't see them once a week. I think if you're seeing people once a week, it's 1 hour out of, 168. And, very quickly, as you know, when you're seeing people for therapy, what has taken place in that room sort of collapses in the face of everything else that's actually happening in your real life, which is where stuff actually happens.
Yeah.
Right.
And, so one of the things that we did was, and we sort of had to do it because of people's chemotherapy schedules, and some people came from interstate, is that we saw people on successive days. So
Yeah.
we saw them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, provided the dose on Thursday, saw them on Friday. And that was like an artifact of scheduling issues. But actually what it did was it accelerated all of those sort of aspects of the therapeutic alliance that needed to be there. It really intensified them. That meant as well that when people came, like, they were totally committed to what they were going to do that week. It's not as though they kind of went off and did sort of other things and, came back a week and where were we? Where did we sort of leave off? There was actually no space for that. And that, I think, was really important, actually. It was really important because it meant that by the time we got to the dose with them, which was sort of, on the 4th day, like, all the important parts of their story, all of the things in their sort of everyday life, their ways of thinking about what their illness means to them, how their illness is sort of made sense of in their world in some way that, becomes part of their life. All those things were right there, and you didn't have to do all of that sort of re-establishing who you were to this person a week ago.
Yeah.
Like, it was really powerful.
I want to segue into some of the subjective experiences of the people who went through this. And just for everyone else who's really interested in the science and the quantitative data and all that sort of stuff, fantastic. We love you very much. Listen to Marg and Justin's other interviews. Not necessarily the place, but as much as we need it, this is a different.
Yeah. I will tell anyone who was like, it is. I mean, again, we're thrilled with the numbers.
Of
We're so
course.
thrilled, but oh my God, it's a sliver of what actually took place. That's the
Yeah.
that's the takeaway there. And again,
Totally.
we're very proud of our results, but what their stories and what they experienced in the room, and seeing that live, like while it was happening. There were times when we were witnessing the most extraordinary, I would say, mending of emotional rupture in time. Like, for example, one participant that we had worked with had an extraordinarily abusive father figure, and when we were working with this participant, they would always look at me during the sessions, and felt kind of safer with my eye contact and so forth, and I knew that they definitely felt comfortable with Justin, but it was just a male kind of a thing, and I went, okay, the work is with him. So even though it looked like I had a stronger relationship, that was not the case at all. And so, but what happened during the session was that there was this enormous sort of letting go of needing to take care of, this sort of very over-involved mother and so forth. And so I was sort of part of this, and there was, quite a lot of tears. She reached out to me. She actually asked for a hug, which we allow if people sit up at the edge of the bed, and so you're not sort of over there. And so I gave her a wee hug, and then she, lay back down. And then I don't know what it was, but I just knew that they needed to see Justin at that moment. And that point was on the other side. And this participant was sort of laying facing me. And the moment I said, come here. And I brought him over, and because she was just sort of laying and holding my hand and looking at me. And then I brought Justin in behind me, and she saw him, and she dropped my hand and she reached out for him. And then there was this exchange of how scared she felt, and he was like, "That's okay, that's okay." Yeah. And so there was this, and then all of a sudden it was like, she smiled, and it was this sort of relaxing and the mending of a rupture, which was so powerful. And then how that played out after in her life was just extraordinary. So there was some real time moments, and I was getting choked up. I'm like, oh my God, this is really great. We had quite a few tears. I don't think I've ever cried so much as a therapist.
Yes.
So having this was, really, really, really powerful. And but I don't know even know where to start.
I was just going to say, because I knew that would be a question that I would ask you guys today on the podcast, but I think that there's just so much you could speak to. And I think, you started speaking along those lines there, Mark, but perhaps just hearing from you, Mark, and then hearing from you, Justin, or vice versa. Was there a particular experience of a patient who sort of moved you the most, or shifted your perception of self, or sort of, evolved you in some way?
There were so many. I don't think there were one.
Yeah.
I think there were so many. There were so many.
And the other part of it too was, because it was such a different way of working, and it was so intense and so intimate. So there were the individual experiences, but also think that, if you emerge from doing that work and you're the same therapist, you kind of miss something.
Yeah.
You haven't been paying attention. You weren't paying attention if you didn't emerge from it changed. And I think one of the biggest things was that, after a sort of a dose session, there really was a need to not just go straight back to the ordinary everyday world. So there was a need, for example, to like ritualize things like the dismantling of the room. Because there's the other thing too is, not jumping around a bit, but we worked with a lot of ritual in the process. And part of that included how the dose room was put together for each individual person.
Oh, lovely.
What they brought in of themselves, where they wanted to be.
What they brought, the special objects that they would bring in from home, little talismans, or, things that were really important to them, and that they want to carry with them on their journey,
Nice one.
journey.
And the other thing too that we would do with that is we would, as part of the preparatory therapy, we would, with the person present, the three of us would set the room up so that actually by the time they came in for their dose, it felt like they had constructed this space that was theirs and theirs alone, which it was. But then, sort of at the end of it, this is something I didn't think about beforehand, because for me, rituals around psychotherapy are, you sit in the waiting room, I'll come and grab you when it's your time. And when your 50 minutes is up, like, see you later.
That's it. Yeah.
Because that was certainly my experience of my own,
Like the
therapy I had as part of my training was, here's the room, sit here, I'll come grab you, 50 minutes, off you go. No matter what state you're in. Which was like wonderful, right? but then to sort of have this sort of experience where, you know, the use of ritual actually became a very important part of the overall process, which included then how you, you know, how the day would finish and what you would do with the room at the end of the day. Like those were things I suppose over time kind of built into what just becomes part of your way of working therapeutically.
Yeah.
The other sort of big change that sort of came with that was, you know, and Marg touched on a bit before when she was talking about acclimating people to the dose room. The actual music experience that we would give people as part of the acclimation
Oh, yes.
became more and more and more focused and specific and intense as well. So that there were all of these kind of rituals that just became a part of the therapeutic process. And, you know, like how could you sort of emerge from all of that and still do it the same way you did it, you know, before it started. So yeah, it was a big.
Well, it was even the ritual, and to go back to you know, when you said, was there someone in particular? There were so many. And I think the thing that we realized and why we needed our ritual to move out of that is because, have you heard of it? I think in Celtic folklore, I don't know if it's Irish but it's Celtic folklore where they talk about the thin places
No.
in the world, or the thin places are kind of like where the veil between living and the dead is.
Interesting.
And it's those liminal spaces where,
Yes.
you know, I guess the altered state became a very thin space for us. And so then to be able to just be thrust out back into the sunlight and just like, whoa, and everyone's like, how's your day?
Yeah.
And you'd been sitting with someone who had witnessed their own death, had been propelled into the cosmos, watched themselves being reborn again and again and again and again and again, or seeing themselves in utero, and in their great grandmother and great, you know, extending back to, you know, day dot, you know, having an experience of the eternal maternal, or, you know, completely ceasing to exist anymore and just becoming a ball of light or a ball of energy. And the number of people that saw deceased loved ones was just so. I don't have one story.
Yeah, totally.
In that way, but what happened for us very quickly, and it was very tangible in the room when they had those states of awe. And awe was an interesting one because it wasn't always just beautiful. It was, you know, I like the way it's described. It kind of lives on the upper reaches of um, awe and terror.
Yes.
So it, you know, pleasure and terror.
Yes.
So it's
or even perhaps ecstasy and terror as well.
ecstasy and terror, exactly. So
Yeah.
it can be beautiful, but it's just like, but
Yeah.
what is this? What is it that I'm seeing? It's too big. It's too much for my brain to kind of deal with. And so the idea is then that, you know, your brain has to kind of expand and adapt and understand.
Yeah, to assimilate, right?
Yeah. So, and I remember sitting so many times just like, and I realized I had a tear, or you know, a number of them. And you know, one particular participant who reached out to me and said, Mark, I'm just in a state of grace, just sobbing in this sort of state and just smiling. And often people would put their arms out. You have no idea what they were seeing at the time, but you'd find out later. And
or not.
Yeah, or not. And then, but you know, but the other things as well, it wasn't always just that beautiful. It was hard won. People worked fucking hard. They really, they saw sometimes the most horrific aspects, and black, malevolent sort of aspects of themselves, or felt like they were drowning, or felt like they couldn't catch their breath, and not physically, but just like, how do I move through this? And often that would be the moment, you know, if they could move through that, that's when it would burst into something numinous. It was that dark moment before it went to the places of awe,
Now,
potentially.
is that moving through akin to accepting? What does that jump off point look like?
Yes and no.
No.
Well, it's
Okay.
not fighting. It's not fighting backwards.
No.
Yes. Okay.
And this is something that we were taught by we've been fortunate enough to receive Indigenous instruction from
Ah, brilliant.
um, uh, people in the Amazon
Mm,
and
mm.
um, and some others as well, which has been phenomenal. And one of the things that we were always taught was trust, let go, be open.
Yeah.
Trust, let go, be open. Trust, let go, be open.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm like, I'm Thomas Aquinas. What a load of shit. Like, like yes, be open. That's very important. But to just let go,
Yeah.
I guess that was in response to a Westerner's attempt to go, no, I don't want this, so, which is their invitation. Don't fight, just let it happen, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
can see the point of that. But actually, they taught us to go into it and
Mm,
interrogate it and
mm.
fight forward,
Mm.
move in. You're there to work.
Interesting.
You're there to engage.
You have choice.
You have choice, move in.
Yes.
But you don't fight backwards, which is
No.
what we do. Unfortunately,
Yes.
because we go, oh, I don't like it, I don't want to feel that, blah, blah, blah. And I remember speaking to our shaman's wife when we went to the Amazon, which we spoke about off
Yeah. Yeah.
um, as part of the documentary. We were lucky enough to go there, and I remember speaking to the shaman's wife, and I said, what do you do when you have an experience that And she said, oh, I tell them. I go in and I tell them. I don't like that. And I'm like like she's interrogating them. What do you want from me? Why are you here? Blah blah blah.
Brilliant.
And then there's sort of this way that then kind of either dissipates, or she becomes an active participant in this, moves in.
Mm,
It's just not something we're great at doing, I think,
mm.
with our Western psychology.
But you just made me think of it now. The big difference, though, in the context is that, like, when we sort of present it here as part of a trial, it's presented as a drug effect.
Yes,
You
that's
are
the
taking
problem.
a drug,
Yeah,
and it's
Yeah.
going to be in your
Yeah.
system for a while, and it's going
yeah.
to come out of your system, and you're going to be okay. And know that you can remind yourself at times if you need to. You've taken a drug, it's in your system, and it's going to leave your system, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Whereas, I think the way that they would view it, well,
Yes,
my
potentially.
yeah, I kind of wonder if, for them, it's actually not a drug experience.
No,
For
no.
them, actually, they're sort of traveling to another place that is populated and known, and, it is without reference to time in the kind of clock sense. It's a place where they can be as active and as involved as they are in kind of everyday life.
Yeah.
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 I think that's
Yeah.
one of the
That's
massive.
really helpful. Yeah. It's a portal, really. It's not
Yes.
a
Yeah.
drug
Yeah.
at all.
Correct.
And that's
Correct.
exactly how it is
Yeah.
seen, treated, and regarded, I think.
Mm.
And again, I don't want to speak for them at all. No place in that way. Just
No.
as it was told to us.
Yes.
Was no, this is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they said that, the concept of ego death, I guess,
Yeah.
which is for us, you lose a sense of self, and that doesn't really,
Mm.
compute. I remember speaking about that it was quite like, it's more like transformation and learning
Yes.
to become part of this other landscape.
I really like that. I really, really like that because I think to your point, acceptance does have its place, obviously, just to completely become passive and allow the experience to wash over you. And I think that's particularly helpful for us in the West because we're so agentic and we don't like surrender and we don't
No,
like
that's right.
but also we're sort of, in the wrong place on the spectrum, so to speak.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
to come back into the middle and have agency and say, you've been pissing me off my whole life. Like, why
Yes.
should I forgive my dad?
Exactly.
Fuck you for
Yes.
saying that. Really sort of tussling.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Which is great. It's a dialogue.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's kind of too, it's not just the being able to, like, confront people that have been pissing you off and to sort of have that chat with them.
Mm,
Also to be able to see yourself through their eyes
mm,
and, have this sort of experience of, compassion and understanding that brings this new depth actually into how you think about them and what the relationship is about.
mm.
Now, there are so many different ways it's kind of
Yeah.
explored. Maybe that's a better word for it. It's not about
Yeah.
it's not about acceptance. it's actually about exploration.
We're thinking out loud as we do
Yeah.
this. It's
Yeah,
you've
it's
got
about-
great questions.
It's about exploration.
It actually is, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about acceptance.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
good. And I think that probably helps a lot of people who have some anxiety from negative experiences in the past or whatever it is. It's like you're not just going to completely lose control. You're going to be a navigator. You're going to
Yeah.
circumvent your own life in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. You can work with this
Yes, yes,
and kind of go, wow, what's over there?
yes.
Let's do it. And so yeah, that in and of itself I think was revelatory for us as well. So it's been an extraordinary learning curve. And I think as well we've realized we've done, I don't know how many doses now have we done?
A lot.
We've done probably, I think, with the study and with another study that we're involved in, and then we do some private
Mm.
work now under the expanded access scheme
Brilliant.
at the clinic. But we probably would be close to 80 dose sessions.
Yeah.
And so seeing that, we still feel like, oh God, we still we've got so much to learn. But
Well, there's still a feeling of there's still I guess a sort of a sense of, with each dose day, like, got no idea what's going to happen.
Where's it going to
go? Absolutely no idea. Have some vague ideas about the sorts of things that might come up, but actually, totally open to abandoning all of those.
Yep.
Which of course you have to, the moment it sort of takes off. So yeah.
And it's so strange, isn't it? Because it's like it's so not a targeted therapy. Like we're sort of talking about it being, it's a treatment for depression, it's a treatment for anxiety, end of life distress, anorexia nervosa, or OCD.
Yeah.
It's not a targeted therapy at all. You take that pill, you have no idea where it's going. It may not be about, for most people, their cancer or their illness, or maybe was this much of a
This is the feel that I'm getting for sure. Yeah.
Do you know what though? I reckon that's like that's a feature of the way that we medicalize and pathologize everything.
Yeah.
I think that's to do with, people come along and they go, I'm going to die and I can't make sense of this.
Yep.
And, we go, okay, well, you've got symptoms A, B, and C.
Exactly.
Not even symptoms, you're reporting changes in yourself, which they are symptoms to us and they are A, B, C.
Yeah.
And therefore you satisfy the criteria for kind of this disorder. And then that becomes the whole focus of what you kind of end up doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because
the beauty of the psilocybin is it just blows it all open. Everything's up for grabs.
Yeah.
Their history, sometimes even their ancestry, it can go in so many directions. Yeah.
It's got nothing to do usually with the disorder, which is being sort of investigated.
And how they experience their body was just another thing as well.
Oh, yeah.
We had this extraordinary, we've had a number of things actually happen. I remember one woman had quite a strong experience where her tumor was screaming at her and demanding attention. It was very challenging, very challenging. So we sort of encouraged her to sort of dialogue with it, and once that dialogue had taken place, and some nurturing had taken place, and we saw that physically the participant kind of moving in and kind of cradling a little bit, and that's when it just took off. They went into this absolutely extraordinary kind of transcendent space. And
yes. And that point there sort of runs in parallel with what you're saying there, Justin, because I think whenever we diagnose something or we use certain criteria, we treat it as other, but from that point there, this is a part of me, and now that I can nurture it, well, then I can initiate myself.
Yeah, it's the divine union,
Yes.
the duality to do that, which is kind of something that was definitely observed. And we certainly had people who kind of came out and went, that was so and so, I don't know what that was. It was, they came out completely discombobulated, and it took quite a bit of time to make sense of and derive meaning from that. And there were moments amongst the sadness or this sort of grief that felt like it had no bottom, or and moments of joy and moments of and things like that. So we would, but we would also kind of go, okay, well, what did that sadness, So we would work with as much as we could, and even just in the symbolic as well. If there were things where there was like, if people had um, a pretty challenging experience or they were anxious or whatever, and there were threads that were left over, we would often find, and this is where the importance of the music, there's a whole other podcast actually, the
Yeah.
music, but there were moments in the music that they felt particularly anguished or really viscerally distressed and aggrieved. We would be like, that's the piece we've got. So we would work with that piece. And I remember we worked with that with one of our participants who really struggled and it felt like it was kind of this thread that was hanging in it. So we would do that in integration. We said, okay, we're going to do this, but this time, instead of having headphones on, we're going to talk with you through this. So let's listen to it again, and we're with you. And so we'd be like, take it back, and then we go, okay, now what happens if you were to, and it's a gentle invitation in, and all of a sudden it seems to transform, and then and you're checking in with them all the time, and gauging how it's going, and then it can move through. And so there's beauty beyond sort of just that dose session as well. But
Yes.
Heavenly God, we had an orgasm
Oh,
in
yeah.
one session,
Yeah.
which was yeah.
Was
We
that
didn't know at the
healing?
time.
Yes, that's
No,
right. But
we
was
didn't
it
know.
healing in response to sexual trauma, or was it along that thread?
No,
Or oh, right.
no, it was meeting a deceased loved one,
Oh, wow.
partner who had
Wow.
died, and this extraordinary union, and
Oh my God, isn't that beautiful?
was breathtaking.
Yeah.
Again, we didn't know it was happening at the
Yeah.
time, which sounds like we're,
I mean, it's pretty
not
reasonably
attentive.
obvious, you thought.
Probably not. Although,
Yeah.
well, no, I think they did.
I think only yeah.
Yeah, but it's an altered state. It's a hard one to kind of get,
Of
but
course.
it was a very, very powerful experience
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
them. And yeah, it was particularly located in a couple of songs and
Ah, beautiful.
that
Beautiful.
person. So yeah.
I have a natural bias with therapy. And my bias is that every single issue or problem or concern fundamentally is relational. Um, um, and I know a lot of people have had, psychedelic journeys where it's just by themselves. But see, even then, they might walk in a forest or something, and the forest itself becomes an entity they can relate to. The self is fundamentally relative. Do you think that sort of beyond safety concerns, and the necessities required to have you both in the room, that as much healing would have occurred for those that did have significant reductions, without having these corrective emotional experiences with you guys present?
Look, I think look, all we can speak to with that is when, how can I say it? Like, it's still therapy. It's still
Mm,
psychotherapy. It's a
mm,
psychotherapy context. And we cultivate it so that when we're in that room and we've already established a therapeutic relationship with them, so projection is
yeah, yeah.
promoted and allowed, and we allow ourselves to be cast in that way. So we hope it kind of comes up in that way. I think it can spontaneously happen sometimes outside of, at a door forward at a festival or someone's weekend away. But that can be like, whoa, what do I do with this, and where do I put it, and who's around to talk to about this? And
Yeah, totally.
it can be tricky. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, where my mind automatically goes is that, in a way, the question you're asking is, how does this actually work?
Mm,
What's essential for this
mm,
actually to work? And, I know we have different views about this, but my view
right.
is that my view is that we do not know at all. My view is that, all the stuff that's been looked at thus far, like superficially is appealing in its explanatory power, but actually
Oh, you're talking
goes
about the science, like all the pictures
but
of the
that's what
pretty
we're
brains.
no,
Yeah,
what we're
yeah,
talking about. We're talking about, like, what does it do? How does
yeah,
it
yeah,
work?
yeah,
What's needed for it to work,
yeah.
right? Like, do you need
I
two therapists? Do you need a room?
oh,
Do
I
you
know,
need
yeah,
this? Do you need
yeah.
a forest? Do you need, this and that and the other? in order for people to have what you would regard as a transformational experience. And I have absolutely no idea.
Well, I mean, the reality is this: if you think about it from a sociological perspective, why is it that festivals are still well, there's festivals, there's dogs. Why do people do psychedelics at festivals? Because there's a sense of community. It feels better.
Totally.
If it felt dreadful and it was like horrific every time, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't go back. But there is something about, I think, being in company of people who perhaps get it.
Yeah.
That people are seeking that kind of experience. And just on that as well, I think there's obviously a lot of interest in this off campus. And I think the thing that people perhaps outside of psychedelic communities who do know what these things can do, and they do have a degree of respect and reverence for them because they know how powerful they can be. I think moving it into the general population who go, oh yeah, maybe I'll just take some shrooms with my girlfriend and and then they end up having a horrific experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's we don't know how they work, but I think suffice to say they can be extraordinarily powerful, and they very reliably provoke intense personal introspection.
Yes, it's an important caveat. I'm reminded of the quote by Jung, be careful of unearned wisdom. And this is why I'm so much in love with the talking cure, because if you're with an attuned therapist, you can slowly titrate into those experiences of awe, which to your point are on the margins of ecstasy and terror, and to get all of that in one, I think even in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, when Krishna appears to Arjuna as manifest, beyond form, it's awe in that moment. It's too much for this little tiny little ego to experience, So it is important that we have a reverence to some of these medicines.
100%. And I think, as well, we did have, at least a couple of experiences where people did have an experience of the transcendent, but it was too much and it was discarded. And so it wasn't, for all reasons and probably very good reasons that they didn't want to revisit or work with or integrate those experiences, which is absolutely fair enough. So yeah, there's it's just, we call it a treatment. I found this ridiculous yesterday where we're calling it a treatment, and I was just like, this is so, how do we fit this into such a broken model? But also it's not a treatment, it's a profoundly personal existential experience.
Yeah, nicely said.
Yeah.
Almost a recalibration of what we thought life was. There seems to be this interesting dynamic of returning to a childlike state, to realize that all the ways in which we demarcate and delineate and discern and move from point A to point B has its place, but it takes away from the felt sense and the meaning making and the being able to share with another, which we don't account for at all. I'll just finish on this point before I'd love to close the circle. One of my favorite bands is Tool. You guys know the band?
Oh yeah.
My favorite quote in a song by them called "Right in Two" is, "Repugnant is a creature who would squander the ability to lift his eyes to heaven, conscious of his fleeting time here." And I think in our day, we've really lost these tricklings of awe, just by looking up at the stars and looking at the beauty of it and the terror of our insignificance. We don't have these offerings anymore that remind us of what it is to be a human being to death.
Well, and I think the thing is, we've got this society that we're trying to edit death out of our awareness, and by doing so, you don't have that connection with the preciousness of life. And so then when it does come, they're so completely overwhelmed by it, where we're just like consumed, paralyzed by it in this way. And the beauty of what the participants that had gone through the study were reporting, and Justin can speak to this better than I can because of the data analysis he's done, but how that shifted, which was stunning. That was stunning, was how they were living before, which was not really living. It was sort of more existing in this constant state of, with these thudding reminders that their life was coming to an end. And how then, the vitality and the creative, force really surged through them, and their ability to be embodied in the present moment was just phenomenal. But their words, like, you can say it so much better than I can.
Oh yeah.
You did yesterday. I was like, damn, that was good. So
No, I think you made me think about this before when you used the word relational, because I think one of the things that we saw was, prior to the dose, like normally in sort of your everyday life, you don't even notice you've got a body, right? You just arrive at the coffee shop you're intending to go to, or you just appear at your destination. There's no noticing that you have a body. It's just part and parcel of who you are. And I think one of the things that we saw with the people that applied to be in the trial was that capacity to kind of be in the moment completely without noticing, that capacity for the world to be just this transparent place where everything made sense, that completely fell apart for people.
Wow.
And so their body, for example, because you mentioned body, it became, instead of this thing that you didn't even notice, it became this assemblage actually of like eerie, unfamiliar, distant kind of symptoms and changes in basic functioning, like breathing and swallowing and so on, and walking. It became this sort of thing that they, it was didn't make sense anymore,
and it had betrayed them.
Had betrayed them, and they had to kind of work actually to sort of negotiate things with all of a sudden this weird thing that they are inside of. And that also happened in their relationships, for lots of them, so instead of having this sort of life world that involved others in this natural and kind of easy way that wasn't really thought about or questioned, all of a sudden people became these like strange, meaningless sort of things that actually, in many cases, heightened the feeling of being alone and heightened the feeling of everything sort of falling apart.
Well, they're in a completely different world then, because they were like, what is this? And everyone else is going about the business of living and looking at them like going, oh, is there anything we do? And it just, this profound isolation in this body that did not make sense anymore. And it was diseased and it was unwell and they were fatigued and they were dealing with this, like, why, and all the wounds and scarring of surgery and basically everything that they were, there was pain relief, like anything and everything they were given was about flattening symptoms and symptom reduction, and it was sedating often or make them tired, make them crook, or and so to give them something like this where they could feel so alive and embodied and sensual at times as well, that they could go, oh my God, there's still me in here, there's life here, there's vitality, and was just, they could change that relationship with their body and then their life.
That's
and what
really
was left.
That's massive, isn't it? I just when I watched you sort of role playing the sympathetic though unfortunately condescending partner or friend or whatever it is, you can see how in that moment, even if it's unconscious, is, oh, they don't see me anymore, they see my cancer.
They see symptoms, they see illness, and and it is, I mean, that's the stuff that's not spoken about, is just how much their world collapses within and around and relationally.
Yes.
And they just feel like they're on this sort of island of aloneness, and it's and time's running out.
Which is why I think your research is so important, particularly to friends and family members of those who are moving through a terminally ill diagnosis, being able to relate to them as who they always knew they were, not as this symptom or whatever it is, that I love that existential distress was a was a was a point of consideration in this, because how much existential distress comes down to our sense of isolation and aloneness in the world,
Yeah. And there was, and families who were just they were so invested in this,
Yes,
family
yes.
and loved ones. Yeah, but it was profound what shifted
Oh,
for people.
and the other thing too was that,
Mm.
you know, when they sort of emerged from it, you know, if it worked for them, which it didn't for everyone, but you know, if it did, actually the world that they now inhabited was much richer than it had ever been before.
Mm,
It was much more precious. Things had much more meaning. And, you know, there was this sort of like, because I guess one of the other big things before they had the dose was that their experience of time completely changed.
Mm.
So they sort of, you know, the future vanished because that's where kind of death was. Their past became this sort of frozen space that they were cut off from, and so, you know, they had no story anymore that made sense of what they were doing right now.
Mm.
Plus, all they were doing is watching the clock,
Mm.
just marking time. And you know, time for them was this, I guess, sort of like metronome, really, of like scans, appointments, symptoms, milestones,
Mm.
conversations with, you know, oncologists and the like. Um, and then afterwards, you know, that relationship to time was fundamentally altered in that, you know, past, present, and future were all there in the moment,
Mm.
yeah.
and all made sense in the moment, and all gave meaning to one another in the moment. So it was really
And then death,
profound. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
these unreachable aspects that you can't get in waking
Yes.
Yeah.
state. You can't get in the talking therapy
Mm.
in your normal waking state, and that they could access that terror, and they could face it, and they could
Mm,
not only face it but experience it and walk and be transformed by it. So then all of a sudden, in the face of death and watching their own death or experiencing it, or however it came uh, up for them, they felt this sense of connection to something much greater than
yes.
themselves. Um, and this experience of not only feeling connected to this something that's much greater, but feeling essential to it as well.
Oh, yes.
And and that somehow gave them peace in the face of death, which is phenomenal. Right? And it was everything you'd hope for. Um,
Yes.
and even, but that's sometimes there was hard won work. They did it, we only had what 7 weeks of work after each dose that we could
Yep.
do with people, which was a real shame. And like one, for example, of our was it 4 or 5? I have to go back and have a look. I should know this. But of the people who, one of the people who didn't get a therapeutic response after the 6 months and hadn't, the experience was very overwhelming, rich in symbolism. Like my God, it was extraordinary, but it was so overwhelming and so big and so frightening
Yeah.
that they did not like it. And at least for a time, it made them actually feel a bit more anxious, and that came down. But it's important to realize it doesn't come without side effects too. Is this it does happen. So this is the importance of having that clinical care. But that person wrote to me a year later and said, "Oh my God, actually, I have been working with this. I get it now.
Oh, it
It was
fits.
one of the most important things that has happened to me.
Yes.
Worked out what this was about, and this. So it's this, you know, what do they say? 6 turns of the key before
Yeah.
the lock will just. And it was a year after, and unfortunately, it was from a research perspective, yeah, we didn't capture that. But how amazing
Yeah.
as someone, to see the work that this participant did, and I was like, I was so elated for them, that and the words that said, "I'm not scared about death anymore. I'm not
Yep.
scared anymore," and that was just so surprising for this person, and how much solace they had derived from that experience. So I was just like, that was stunning. So, but again, it's sort of clinical trials are clunky. We have a certain amount of time where we have to use things and capture data, but it just shows you it's not just a one and done. It's not just a one day. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and all of them worked their asses off. Like they worked so hard.
Yes.
They
Yes.
faced terror. They experienced some really, really intense states, and some of them had extraordinary beauty that they were able to see and touch and experience. But yeah, for the ones who really did very well, yeah, just peace in the face of death was amazing.
I love that you said before that for those that did have a therapeutic response to it, I suppose it's
Yeah.
weird using words like that for
I
stuff like
know,
this.
it's
Yeah,
so,
it's very
that's
strange.
why I was sort of putting it into this
I was
context.
saying it and I'm thinking, oh, this is
Yes.
gross. But the part that I love that you said, Marg, was they felt that they experienced a relationship with with the transcendent, but then they also felt that they were essential to it, as if
Mm,
they came here to play some role, and death is a stepping stone in that role or an aspect of it. You know,
yeah,
just you can just hear how meaning becomes imbued with that idea.
yeah.
It's beautiful, especially for those that become really nihilistic in the face of death, and so on.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a bit of ontological shock. I know that's a phrase you don't really like, but there is that ontological shock that can happen for
Mm.
people. They don't have a framework for this, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they see something and they go, "I don't know how to understand this
Yep.
anymore. I thought I knew that there was nothing, and now I don't know."
Yes.
And that can certainly happen too,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
can leave people with more questions.
It's
Um,
amazing how those subtle hints in tone, life has no meaning
yeah.
to life has no meaning
Like,
can change.
you're just like, what is this? What
Yep.
is that? What was that about? Oh my God, I still don't know. I want to know, but I don't even know where to start looking. So there's, yeah, that can certainly happen too.
Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
know we could talk for hours, and I hope we do another podcast down the line for sure, because there's so much we haven't touched on. Justin, for your sake, I'd love to touch more into some of the themes with the analysis of the qualitative data and just everything. But for the sake of time, what do you hope that people who aren't necessarily therapists or researchers or whatever, just general pop, what do you hope that people take away from this research? Perhaps Marg and then Justin.
Oh my gosh. Look, I think we've gone a long way from where we were, even when we started out, um, in terms of how we understand and locate psychedelics in our cultural psyche. It certainly arrived with a lot of socio-political baggage.
Mm,
There was a nasty hangover from the Controlled Substances Act,
mm,
and also I think as well we looked at it just as this sort of like a counterculture drug, and we
yeah.
haven't really understood. No, it goes actually much further back than this. It's been used in Indigenous societies for so long, and
Mm,
we actually have a
Mm,
colleague who, Elissa,
mm.
um, what's her last name? I can't.
Dose Guerra.
Seguera,
yeah.
who, she's an archaeologist.
She's a
Is it?
archaeobotanist.
Archaeobotanist
Yeah.
who found,
Yeah.
evidence of psychedelic
Mm,
substance
mm,
in hair samples of Neanderthal.
Oh my goodness.
So we don't know anything
That's
about this.
yeah.
Like, yeah, our only point of reference is the swinging 60s and blah blah, and all of that. But actually, it has such a rich history. It has a sacred history, and in many societies that
Mm,
we um, are not acknowledging and we're not learning
mm,
about. And I think so. They have a much richer,
mm.
deeper history and a deserving of respect. I think.
yes.
In that way. So I think what do I want them to know? Depends where they fall on the continuum. It's not going to just reset your brain.
Yeah.
um, at the same time, it's oh God, what was that reefer madness sort of
Oh yeah.
bullshit? But but these can
Mm,
actually promote very powerful
mm,
and profoundly beneficial
mm.
and enriching um, spiritual experiences for people
Yeah.
that can be, very transformative.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
mm,
at the right time
Mm.
with the right people,
of course.
you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I guess that would be my only, I
Mm.
guess, takeaway.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And we've been in relationship to them for such a long time
We
as
have.
well.
We need to remember. I think that's the great thing. There's the Indigenous talk about, we've fallen into a great forgetting, and we need
Yes.
to start remembering.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. So I think.
What about yourself, Justin?
I'm wondering if I should say this or not, actually.
Oh no, we might have to cut it out.
Yeah,
No, no, no,
exactly.
because I guess like what I sort of when you and I just thought of it before when you spoke about the dangerous drug drug act,
Oh yeah,
drug act. Is it
yeah.
like, I think a lot of the current narrative around this is as inaccurate and as offensive
Mm,
as that was as
yeah.
well.
Nicely said.
Just in a different way,
Mm,
in a kind of diminishing,
yeah.
almost satirically absurd kind
Yeah.
of way.
Reductive as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's as absurd.
Mm.
Um, so there's that. But yeah, I guess the other thing too is that as you mentioned, Mark, it's and this is one of the things I think that we are really grappling with is, you know, where it's come from, how we've extracted it
Mm,
from these traditional settings, and are now sort of presenting it and pretending that it's kind of something new,
Mm.
and that it's a medical treatment of some sort.
and how do we put it into such a broken system? I think,
Absolutely.
one of the things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we had a participant who, Divine, said to us, at the end, um, had stage 4 breast cancer, and she said, that was just one of the most profound things I have ever gone through. I don't understand why I had to nearly be dead before I got to experience it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and look, I'm all for cognitive liberty. I think, people can be adults, know what the risks are, and they need to know what it is. And
Yeah.
I am absolutely for decriminalization. And on that point, by the way, off-campus use has absolutely soared, as you can imagine. As long as people know what they're doing, they're safe.
Right.
I can't,
Totally.
I
Totally.
can't say yes or no, but I personally believe in decriminalization, and this
For
is,
sure. For
yeah,
sure.
yeah. But I think, yeah, we have to work on our relationship. It is relational. We have to work on our relationship with psychedelics in the West.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I really
Yep.
think we do. And I don't think, I have to say this, I'm really proud of the work that we've done, but I don't think that just because we happen to be the medical experts, that we have ownership, control, and dictate of how these are used in our society.
Mm.
But just one part of a much greater community of people who have interest in these
Yep.
compounds.
Yep.
So I'm mindful of where we sit as clinicians, and to not allow medicine to own, co-opt, commodify this. I'm very, very
Yeah.
much about rewilding psychedelics as well.
Yes. Yes. But this, at the same time, if I could just sort of come to your aid, the both of you there, what you have done as a stepping stone, right, is demonstrate the efficacy of psychedelics in the contemporary language that really does take leadership and control over the Western world. Like if we can use science as a language to show that there's a lot of efficacy to this, hopefully at the end of the day, we can get back to sort of amalgamating into the way we've lived for such a long time. It's annoying that we
Yes.
sort of have to go all the way around,
Yeah.
but
It's true. We've lost touch with so much, haven't we? We've really,
Totally.
we need to rewild.
totally.
Yeah.
So it's public, people can read it.
They can.
Yep.
Well,
All right.
yeah. By the time this comes out,
Yes.
yes, General Hospital Psychiatry,
Open access.
open access. Yep. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
How good's that? So the name of the research, please, just for everyone. I'll put a link in the.
Yeah. No, it's so psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy for the treatment of depression and anxiety and life-threatening illness, a phase 2B randomized study.
Yep. Brilliant. Brilliant. Like I said, for everyone who's interested in reading it, I'll put a link in the description, of course. Thank you so much. This 5 years in the making, this
Oh
was.
my God, I know.
This interview. How's that?
It's been phenomenal.
And I was just annoying the shit out of you once or twice every couple of years. Marg will say, "Hey, what's going on with you guys?"
We're still going, Tom.
Yeah.
But it's been gorgeous. Thank you so much. And it's been lovely having you along the journey right from the beginning, actually, and then seeing my hair go grey.
Well, me going bald at the same time. So there you go. Justin, Marg, thank you honestly so much. I really,
So
really
much.
hope that this gets out, and hopefully we can do another podcast down the line as well, because there's so much we haven't spoken about. So
We love having chats with you.
beautiful.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, speak to you soon. Marg, Justin, thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.